Hello, friends, and welcome back to another set of stories about entitled people. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. All right, let's get into it. We organized a vote to remove our HOA president. She refused to accept the results. I live in a mid-sized suburban neighborhood in northern Arizona, and like many before us, we fell victim to a tyrannical HOA president who treated our community like her personal fiefdom. Her name's Cynthia, and for years she ran things like a dictator in a sun hat. She wrote violation letters over trash cans left out for 5 extra minutes, fined people for unapproved garden gnomes, and once tried to force a neighbor to repaint their garage door because the shade of beige wasn't neutral enough. People grumbled, but no one fought back until last year when Cynthia single-handedly removed another board member, a nice guy named Alan, because he dared to question her budget allocations. She used a technical clause in the bylaws to push him out through a neighborhood vote. It worked. She made the mistake of teaching us how to do it. So when she started doubling down, sending fines to single moms for unmowed grass during monsoon season and banning residents from the Facebook page for negative energy, a group of us decided to use her own playbook against her. We gathered signatures, dozens of them. People were lining up to sign once they realized we weren't just complaining, we were organizing. When we submitted our formal petition to the board, they were required to schedule a vote within 30 days. We figured, fine, this'll take a while. Day 10, nothing. Day 20, still nothing. Day 30, radio silence. Instead, Cynthia and her husband, a red-faced guy named Doug, who seems to think owning a clipboard makes him law enforcement, started going door to door. They demanded names. "We need to know who signed that petition," Doug told one of my neighbors. "You might have been misled." Meanwhile, on Facebook, Cynthia started posting vague threats about dishonest actors in the community and how certain people might regret trying to undermine leadership. Then came the retaliation. People suspected of signing got slapped with violations for the dumbest reasons. A retiree named Lisa got fined because her potted plants obstructed the walkway. My neighbor Kevin got cited for non-conforming mailbox, which literally came from the same model as Cynthia's. We realized quickly she had no intention of allowing the vote. But our bylaws were clear. After 30 days of inaction, we could schedule it ourselves, so we did. We hired a neutral third party to run the vote, an HOA-certified mediator. We sent out mailers, held the meeting at the community center, and followed the rules to the letter. Cynthia didn't even show up. When the votes were tallied, the results were clear. 74% voted to remove her. The next morning, the Facebook group lit up. Cynthia posted, "That vote was illegitimate. I didn't get to speak my piece." Someone replied, "You were invited and refused to attend." She deleted that comment and banned the user. Then she locked the group. We thought it was over, but then the management company, which she called her partner in governance, announced they were refusing to recognize the vote. Apparently, Cynthia was the official liaison between the HOA and the management firm, so when she said ignore it, they did. The other board members, most of whom quietly hated her, started resigning in protest. Within a week, 3 out of 5 had quit. Now she was basically the only one left, and the management company was backing her up. They claimed procedural issues and announced they were holding a new vote, this time run by them. In other words, the fox was now officially in charge of counting the chickens. That was the last straw. A group of us, me, Kevin, and Lisa, pooled money for a lawyer. He reviewed the bylaws, the vote records, the emails, all of it. His face went from curious to delighted. "She's cooked," he said. Turns out by refusing to honor the legitimate vote and directing the management company to ignore board decisions, Cynthia had breached fiduciary duty, and the management company, by following her personal orders, had broken state HOA statutes. Our lawyer sent a formal cease and desist to both Cynthia and the management firm, demanding immediate recognition of the vote and threatening civil action for fraud and retaliation. When they ignored that too, he filed a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, the agency that oversees HOAs. 2 months later, an investigator showed up. Within a week, the management company quietly cut ties with Cynthia, citing conflict of interest. The investigator found enough evidence of misconduct to recommend her permanent removal from the board and fines for both her and the firm. The new board held an emergency meeting, this time with actual oversight. The vote to remove her, the same one we'd held months earlier, was ratified and made official. Cynthia stormed out mid-meeting, muttering about lawsuits and fake residents. The neighborhood's been peaceful ever since. The Facebook group's unlocked, the fines stopped, and people actually talk to each other again. Nothing unites a neighborhood faster than one overzealous HOA Karen. She thought she had the power, but the second she kicked out Alan, she accidentally built a resistance. You guys did what everyone dreams of. Use her own bureaucracy to bury her. And our second story. My manager demanded this scanner match the system, so we made it happen. He was fired years later when an audit found thousands of items missing. When I was in university, broke and surviving mostly on instant noodles, I picked up a weekend job at one of those big box office supply stores. You know the kind, harsh fluorescent lights, rows upon rows of paper reams, and that permanent scent of printer toner mixed with burnt coffee. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough to keep my bank account from flatlining. Most days were routine, ringing up customers, restocking shelves, trying not to lose my mind during back-to-school season. But every few months, the store manager would announce a dreaded event, stock take. Basically, we had to grab handheld barcode scanners and spend hours verifying that the physical inventory matched what the computer said we had in stock. Sounds simple, right? Yeah, if the system wasn't a complete dumpster fire. The truth was, our inventory database was a disaster. It claimed we had hundreds of items we hadn't seen in years and ignored others that were sitting right in front of us. Add to that the constant petty theft, booth from customers, and occasional staff, and it became clear that the system was basically a work of fiction. But our manager, Phil, refused to believe that. In his mind, the computer was flawless. If the numbers didn't match, it wasn't because the system was wrong, it was because we were lazy. I still remember one particular night, my coworker and I were scanning the electronics section when I noticed something off. "Hey, Phil," I said, holding up the scanner. "The system says we've got 37 of these 19-inch CRT monitors. I've found 3. He didn't even look up from his clipboard. "You're not looking hard enough," he said flatly. "We've checked everywhere. There's no way." I said, "Keep looking," he snapped. "You're not leaving until the hand scanner matches the system." That was the last straw. If Phil wanted perfection, fine. We'd give him perfection. So he started complying. Just not in the way he imagined. If the system said we had 37 monitors, we'd scan the same 3 over and over until the scanner was happy. Boom, numbers matched. If the computer said we didn't have something, even though it was sitting right in front of us, we'd just make it disappear. Some of the more creative employees hid things behind towers of paper boxes or up on storage racks where no one ever looked. Others, myself included, preferred the quicker route, straight into the paper compactor. Within a few stock takes, the system and scanners were in perfect harmony. Phil was thrilled. You see, he'd boast to the regional manager, flawless accuracy. My team runs like a machine. Meanwhile, we'd be snickering in the break room, fully aware that the machine he bragged about was built on pure bullcrap. The best part, Phil thought our efficiency made him look good, so he kept rewarding us with early nights and pizza. Nobody complained. If he wanted fantasy numbers, we'd deliver fantasy numbers. Fast forward a few years, I'd long since left the store, graduated, and moved on to better things. Then one day I ran into an old coworker at a coffee shop. Naturally, we started reminiscing about the chaos of those late-night stock takes, laughing about how we used to feed the compactor more keyboards than customers ever bought. That's when she dropped the bombshell. Apparently, corporate had finally sent in an external audit team. They spent a week combing through every department, matching physical stock against the computer's data. And the results? A total catastrophe. The system claimed the store still had thousands of high-value items, monitors, printers, office chairs, but the actual shelves were practically empty. The auditors determined that the records must have been falsified over multiple years. And since Phil had personally signed off on every single inventory report, he was the one held responsible, fired on the spot. I couldn't stop laughing. For years, he'd treated the computer system like gospel truth and dismissed everyone who tried to tell him otherwise. He even used to brag about how tight his store's numbers were. Now he was probably trying to explain to corporate where those 3,000 missing office chairs had disappeared to. The irony was almost poetic. Phil was right in one way, the system never lied, it just reflected exactly what he wanted to see. A perfect store run by a perfect manager. We just made sure to give him that illusion, one fake barcode at a time. Phil was that classic manager archetype, never wrong, always condescending, allergic to logic. Every workplace has one, the kind who trusts the software more than the staff actually doing the work. The irony that his downfall came from perfect reports? Perfection by committee, baby. You didn't even have to sabotage him. You just did exactly what he said. And our next story. The neighbor versus the sun queen. My cat has one great passion in life, sunbathing. She doesn't chase birds, she doesn't roam the neighborhood, she just flops dramatically onto the warm grass in our backyard and spends her afternoons judging the world like a tiny furry monarch. Yesterday, though, I got a knock at the door. It was my neighbor, the one whose dog never stops barking at squirrels, mail carriers, and passing leaves. She looked serious, like she was about to inform me of some terrible civic offense. "Can you keep your cat off your garden?" she said. I blinked. "You mean my garden?" "Yes, your cat distracts my dog. He can see her from the window and it upsets him." For a second I thought she was joking. I actually laughed. Big mistake. She didn't laugh back. Her face stayed pinched, like she was waiting for me to issue a formal apology on behalf of my sunbathing feline. So I said, well, I can try to explain boundaries to her, but she doesn't really respond to reason. Nothing, just a frown. At that point, I decided to meet absurdity with absurdity. Would it help if I blindfolded the cat? Still no reaction, not even a hint of a smile. She just said, "Please take this seriously. My dog is very sensitive," and walked off like she'd just filed a formal complaint. Fast forward to today. I look out my kitchen window while making coffee, and there she is installing a curtain across her backyard window, not for privacy, not for sun control, but for the dog. A literal dog curtain. So now her golden retriever can no longer witness the horror of my cat peacefully existing 2 yards away. And my cat, she's currently sprawled on the grass, tail flicking lazily, squinting up at the sun like she's queen of the cul-de-sac. The irony? Her dog still barks. At nothing. The curtain didn't fix that, but it did give my cat one less pair of judgmental eyes on her. And honestly, she seems more relaxed than ever. I've decided not to engage any further. If my neighbor wants to wage a silent war against the sight of my cat, that's her hill to die on. I'll keep my cat's routine the same. 11 a.m., sunspot. 3 p.m., bird watching. 5 p.m., dramatic stretch. At this point, I think we all know who really won. The true victory here is your cat's serene indifference. While your neighbor was buying curtains and frowning, your cat was living her best life, blissfully unaware that she was the subject of a one-sided Cold War. This is the perfect example of how some people will build an entire infrastructure to avoid minding their own business. And our last story. Resting bee-face meets instant karma. Story from quite a few years ago, from when I was a bartender in a corporate-style cookie-cutter restaurant. I mostly worked nights, but had one regular midday shift on Fridays. We were always super busy at the bar for lunch on Fridays and usually had quite a few of the mall workers coming in to eat, then head back to work. Nearly every Friday, the same smug, borderline rude lady came in for lunch. Every time she paid exact change, 0 tip. Maybe half the time she would complain over some minor inconvenience, and more than a few times got a comped meal. The more I had to wait on her, the more indignant and pissed I got. So around Christmas time, I was out and about in the mall buying for family and friends, picked out something nice for my girlfriend at the time, a sheer top which I thought would look amazing on her. Decently priced, with it being on sale too. Walking up to the cashier, I was a bit surprised to run into resting bee-face. Whatever, in street clothes, I felt like she barely registered who I was, or maybe she really didn't care who was at her register, maybe both. So I handed her a $20 bill, she examines it for a moment, turned it over twice, held it up to the light even, then out comes the counterfeit pen marker, thinking to myself, a bit excessive, no? Change should have been around $1 and change. Surprisingly, she hands out $81 plus change. She calls next in line, so I step to the side for a moment in contemplation. I could honestly feel the devil on one shoulder, an angel on the other. Took me a moment or two, but I finally let my moral compass win and stepped back in front of the register. I nicely explained that there was a mistake made, but before I could continue, she shot me down and briskly told me in a semi-professional tone to get the F out of here. So I did. The way I look at it, all those lost tips and the money she just gifted me was just karma. Sucked to be her, I guess. I have no issues with how this was handled. I would have done the same. But I'm wondering if she would have gotten into way more trouble if you complained to a manager about her bad customer service and cash handling. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.